some of these medications that are being used is they stop working after a while. The body either shrugs it off or becomes accommodated to the medications, or what it's doing is it's not perfectly controlling it. It's not a cure. I think it's just a symptomatic treatment. So what you may find is that you may need to increase the time on the mattress pad over time, because you may get some control over it initially, and then you start to break through again. And again, you may have to increase, say, maybe from 8 minutes twice a day to 16 minutes, and you may have to end up about 30 minutes twice a day. I probably would not increase it beyond 30 minutes a couple of times a day.
Any suggestion about what part of the brain is affected?
I'm not sure. I have to go back to the literature, and maybe somebody on the line may be able to help us here who's done any research on this. I think it's a deeper central problem in the brain. I don't think it's related to Parkinson's, or maybe I don't think it causes Parkinson's, but it may be a cousin of something like that, in which case, again, it's in the deepest parts of the brain, which is another reason that I suggest wrapping the head, because then you get a maximum penetration of the field through the brain.
Okay, thank you.
And what's the setting for that?
Again, what I would do is to make sure the person has tolerance to the fields. Gradually build that up until you can get to a 10.
Okay.
You should know, again, particularly 10s at bedtime, and here's a trade-off. If you try to stimulate deep into the brain at bedtime, you may also overstimulate the brain. So you may help the restless legs, but the person can't sleep anyway. So you're going to have to find a fine line between overstimulation and understimulation. So one of the possibilities would be to use the pillow, say, for example, for 16 minutes at setting 10, and then finish it off with another 16 minutes at setting 1, so the person can get to sleep. Setting 1 won't undo what you just did with 10. But what it does is it may help to rebalance some of the other chemistry that allows you to be able to go to sleep. And as always, people just are going to have to experiment with it. Every body is different. And, you're just going to find what works the best for that particular individual.
Thank you.
Hope that works.
Thank you.
QuantronResonanceSystems.com.
We have time for one more question.
I have one more question. Hello?
Yes?
What is your experience, if you have, with any children who might have ADD or ADHD? Any success with using the mask?
There is a pediatrician in the Harrisburg area who's been using magnetic fields in kids with ADD. HD, and he's found all sorts of fields to be very helpful.
His name is?
I can't remember his name at the moment.
Okay.
But I've heard him speak at a meeting, at a national meeting on the subject, and I think he's actually gone to Australia to talk to people there about magnetic fields. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really make any difference, whether you know his name or not. The issue is that if you expose the person, the child, and he found various fields to work, so it really doesn't matter what you use, whether it's a back magnet or a shoe magnet or a mattress pad.
Mm-hmm.
Children often respond to whatever system you put them on. What I would do is I would start off with the lowest setting you can for 8 minutes, twice a day, and see what happens. If you need to increase it, one of the things I've been telling people on the phone and conferences before when I've spoken about ADD or ADHD, is it's absolutely critical to get kids off all sugar. Because what happens is their bodies are exquisitely sensitive to adrenaline. And what happens with sugar is that it causes these very significant peaks to insulin. And I'll bet you these children tend to produce high insulin levels. And when that happens and there's no food behind it, no good food behind it other than pure starch or the pure carbs, they crash. And when they start crashing, they start pouring out adrenaline, and the adrenaline drives them nuts. So having a stable diet with a significant amount of protein and fats in it is critically important. I've given people advice in my practice over the years who've had similar kinds of problems when they describe themselves as having hypoglycemia. The most important thing you can do is go on an Atkins-type diet where you significantly cut back, or the Sugar Busters diet, where you significantly cut back on refined starches. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter how many magnets you throw at somebody, because the diet, the nutrition will always undo anything that you do with magnetics.
Okay.
So then, if you've done the magnetics, if you've done the diet, and you control the diet significantly, and they have a proper amount of rest, and they get a reasonable amount of exercise, and don't sit in front of a TV for too long, because the TV can be hyperstimulating. Then playing the video games, the arcade games in front of the TV. Some people are very, very sensitive to the stimulation from TV. Music is also very important. High-frequency music, very fast-paced music, jarring, loud, fast-paced music is hyper-stimulating to the nervous system. So if you're already, on adrenaline drive, adding that extra music stimulus, so they need quieter music, they need quieter time in order to be able to have the nervous system be less irritated. And then the magnetic fields on top of it help to soothe. I would probably use the magnetic field at the lowest settings. This is a general principle for treating psychological problems, for treating anxiety, for treating depression. The low settings, 1, 2, and 3, are probably the best settings. And for that, you could use upwards of 30 minutes at a time if you need to. Start off, in the case of children, I would tend to start off with the least amount of time at the lowest setting, and then gradually over time increase it if you need to maybe 30 minutes at the most twice a day, but at setting 1, 2, or 3.
If I were to be suggesting this to someone that I know who has a child with it, what should I tell them in terms of what they could expect in terms of a result? Obviously, it's not immediate. Is that something that might take a week, 2 weeks to see any changes?
No, very often with ADD, it's dramatic. It's very fast, within days, within several days. But, the same principle applies to everything. Everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ADD is not just one problem, it's a spectrum of problems. If it's a true hyperactivity disorder as opposed to attention deficit disorder, because they're different, they're very different. Attention deficit disorder can also be due to psychological problems, psychosocial problems, problems in the family, separated families, that sort of stress. These kids often act out and often get labeled as AD, but they're not. ADHD is another matter, and that's what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with somebody else suggesting that this child who happens to be hyper is just hyper, not ADHD. So there are some issues there. So you have to have a good diagnosis. If you do, then I think you can expect a very significant improvement, because the QRS tends to, most of the time, settle down the nervous system. It tends to affect the EEG and the brain waves, basically, and the neurochemistry in a way that causes, I don't know what other people on the phone have experienced, but my experience is that probably 70 to 80% of people who use the QRS actually are sleepy on it, even at a setting 10.
Mm-hmm.
So it affects neurochemistry and the electrophysiology of the brain in a way that causes the brain to relax.
So when this person or child is on the mat, you would have them fully on the mat with their head to their toes?
That would be the preference, and if you don't have them fully on the mat, then I would be sure that their head at least is on the mat and doesn't angle off.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I would start.
Okay.
And again, use the low settings.